Fab. This is Aide De Camp here, and we are doing a presentation on Be Our Guest, which is the final book of our book study for improving our customer experience. And so we're excited to share our key takeaways from the book, and yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy it.
Be our guest. Be our guest. Put our service to the test.
So, the book dons its name from the popular Disney movie Beauty and the Beast, and definitely one of my favorite Disney songs. Uh, that's beside the point. We got a great book to share with you. The contents here, we're going to just follow the outline of the book. So, Disney's approach to quality service, which is actually the training that we're going to, and where we'll be leaving with actionable plans for improving our customer experience. So we're going to get firsthand experience seeing how Disney treats its customers. This book kind of lays out some of the foundation for what we'll be training on. We're going to talk about the magic of service, the magic of cast, the magic of setting, the magic of process, the magic of integration, and then we'll wrap it up. So, our first slide is the Disney approach to quality service.
Yeah, and so kind of the big idea here is they launch into sort of the Disney version of customer experiences, the notion that magic, there's this idea of practical magic and the magic of Disney and kind of the feedback from customers and guests as they interact with Disney and interact with the parks. And it's just kind of like a common takeaway that people have is it's like there actually is magic there. And they point out this doesn't happen accidentally. It's something that's it's programmed into customer experience. It's thought through very carefully. It's engineered. And there's a quote from the book that says, "You build the best product you can. You give people effective training to support the delivery of exceptional service. You learn from your experiences and you celebrate success. You never stop growing. You never stop believing." And so there's like this magical, like everyone, everything, every part of the organization is rowing in the same direction, trying to build that practical magic. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and I think this book kind of layered on nicely with past books, maybe Save and Accept the Thank You Economy, which kind of took a completely different approach or view on the customer experience. But the one element of all of these books in terms of like how to build the wow factor into your customer experience is often starts with some sort of like internal look at your organization, like what do you, in past books it was like, what do you want your customer experience to be, and starting with that. And this one kind of lays out a challenge of like, or creates an opportunity for us to look internally and like really identify and clarify like our challenges as an organization. So as a group, the six of us, kind of listed out some of what those challenges are that face our organization. So some of those things include like an economic cycle, just in a macro sense, like what the economy's doing, but even within our niche, what are the cycles there? Increased competition. One challenge that's been a historic challenge for us is just staffing and finding talented and skilled individuals to come join our organization. So not just competing with other companies that do the same type of work that we do, but competing for labor in the labor market. And so there's a bunch of things here, but these are all these are things that we identified as challenges that our business faces, and ultimately I think the book kind of puts you in the mindset to like kind of start addressing some of these things through your customer experience. So.
Yeah, and Jeff, you mentioned the like wow factor, and that's something that the book described in a way. They kind of put it in their own Disney way, so they called it bumping the lamp. And where that comes from is the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and there's a scene where Bob Haskins, who plays Eddie Valiant, who's one of the main characters, bumps into a lamp, and it's swinging back and forth, and it shows like the shadow of his character, who's a real life actor, and also the shadow of the cartoon rabbit, Roger Rabbit. So it's just like that attention to detail is what creates that practical magic that Brian was, talking about at the beginning of the slide. So just wanted to make that clear. That's Disney, describing one of their wow factors, just the attention to that detail, and how companies that pay that much attention to the finer things can really create that magical experience for their customers.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the one maybe key aspect of that story was the fact that initially they didn't have that covered off on, and like somebody like noticed that and was like, "Hey, we've got to fix this." Maybe even understanding that most of the people that watched the movie wouldn't have caught on to it, but it's like picking up on the details that maybe nobody notices or pays attention to. Like is a like that's the depth that or the lengths to which Disney goes in providing their customer experience. So.
Yeah. They brought up another movie, Wall-E, which I'm sure more people have seen. And all the trash that's in the far landscapes and all the knickknacks that he collects. It's just even the things that people won't see, like they're doing. So it's just one of those comparisons to other businesses, so that they could take lesson in.
So something that stood out to me about the bumping the lamp example is that it's those extra details that sometimes people don't or may not notice. It's those details that makes practical magic believable. So you can talk about your company having magic all you want, but unless you're willing to do the work and add those details, that magic may not be believable. To me, it's that wow factor that could really help create magic here. So something that both meets and exceeds customer expectations is what can create that wow factor and maybe some magic for our customers.
Yeah, and so the next slide kind of gets into the details of that, like the first aspect of the magic, and that's the magic of service.
Yeah, so this kind of gets into, okay, so every organization wants magic. Like, how do you approach this? And do you galvanize the troops and everybody gets excited to go and just, engineer the magic in their own sort of sphere and domain or silo or however? And one thing that the book points out is that there's a good chance that like the go-getters, the achievers, a lot of the people, like the key people, well-intentioned people on staff might take off running in opposite directions to implement their own versions or visions of quality service. And then everyone else is gonna, in that environment, can end up looking around, like trying to understand what their role is and how these things get baked out. And so what the Institute approach advocates for is something called the Quality Service Compass. And it's got 4 points, and it's kind of just a tool used to kind of engineer this entire thing throughout the organization. So Kent, you want to hit on the first one?
Yeah. That first one is guestology. It's the art and science of knowing and understanding your customers. A question that we could be asking ourselves is, what is the context within which we here at ArchFab are seeking to exceed expectations? Every decision, we should really be measuring against that. We should be looking at that aspect of it.
And one of the second points is the quality standard purposes, and it ultimately has 2 purposes. One is establishing the criteria for actions to accomplish the service strategy, and then establish the measures of quality service. So we can't measure our quality service if we don't establish kind of what we're measuring within that.
Yeah, and that third point is delivery systems, and that breaks down into 3 different sections. So all companies have these 3 delivery systems. One is your cast, which is simply your employees, your workforce. 2 is your setting, which is wherever your customers meet with you. 3 is process, and that kind of brings together your cast and your setting, like brings both of those things into play. And then these like the delivery systems, along with guestology and quality standards that Kent and Shelby went through, like they combine, like they must align and combine. And like with that, that's when you achieve like true integration, which is the last point on the compass. So
Also, in talking about setting up these 4 points on the compass, they mention combustion points. So those are places where things can go wrong with customers. One of the 4 combustion points is customers who have special needs. So kind of an example here would be when customers need us to go outside any of our processes. I know that sometimes happens within our billing process in my department. So we try to accommodate those customers as much as possible to avoid that combustion point being an issue.
yeah, and a combustion point that is brought up in the book, and like something that everyone is probably experienced is waiting. Disney, a combustion point for them is people waiting in line to ride their attractions. So when I was thinking about like how can ArcFab and Disney, like how do ArcFab and Disney compare, and what similarities do we have? I thought like our customers wait as well. Like they're waiting for submittals, they're waiting for our product to be installed. So yeah, I'm looking forward to, you know, the Disney Institute so they can give us some tools on how to alleviate that combustion point, because it's definitely been something in the past where our customers, like meeting those deadlines and our communication with them and correspondence with them while they're waiting, it can definitely be improved. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, that's great. So the next part of the book is laying out the magic of service. So Ryan, you got some thoughts on kind of getting this slide kicked off?
Yeah. So this kind of starts really getting into like the details, some of the weeds of like how you start defining these things, and it all starts. Kent highlighted that first point with guestology, and Jeff, you mentioned earlier like how a lot of these books have kind of mapped onto each other and sort of layered on similar ideas or expanded them. And one of those things that has transcended all the books is just sourcing and engaging. So starting off internally, like how we're doing, what we want, what we want to be capable of, and like where we're headed. But a big piece of that also that needs to intersect it is like what the market and customer research like should dictate that we should be doing. And like learning, Disney uses the language of learning who their guests are and like understanding what their expectations are, and sort of bringing things into alignment with that. And so they actually frame up like ways of doing that are some things that we have in place here, which I just think like bodes well and like sets us up well as we expand this out. And so they encourage organizations to know and understand their guests by knowing their demographics, knowing the customer's psychographics. So like the value of a demographic is that it reveals who the customer is, like where they came from. So like in the context of guests visiting a park, it's just simply like where they came from, how much money they spent to get there, like who they are, so that you can like, if you know who they are, then you know who they're not, right? So when we looked at that for us, like this is already an established thing like that we've done as a company. We know who, as it stands today, like the demographics of our customers. They're going to be general contractors and or architects. They're going to be long tenured businesses that are reputable partners that we want to work with. They're going to be in the commercial construction industry. They specialize in the verticals that we want to operate in. And they're gonna be a certain size company and do a certain size of projects so that it makes sense for us. So like we have all of that defined in our demographics. And then they, like I mentioned before, they advocate for the understanding your customer's psychographics, which is more like where your they call it helping, like knowing where your guests' mental states are. So like what they need and want versus just who they are, like what emotions they experience when they interact with you. And so we like the psychographics that we've got expressed right now are like we want customers that are relationship focused, that understand like the value of our like turnkey end-to-end value proposition. They're not necessarily price driven. So some of those things all come into play. And so we feel like we're set up well to kind of keep expanding this out and thinking this through and deciding who we want to pursue customer-wise.
Yeah, so I think you touched a little on this, Ryan, too, but in developing the guestology compass, Disney really focuses on these 4 points when communicating with customers and trying to get feedback with them. I know some of the other books we read did mention communicating more with customers to find out what they want. Disney wanted us to sit down and do this exercise where we look at these 4 points, and those are finding out what do our ArcFab guests need. So that could be a really simple answer, a sunshade, a vacation, something like that. But then you need to look deeper and also look at what do the guests want. So this is going to be less obvious. It's more of the deeper purpose of what they're trying to get out of that need. Disney says it's also important to look at this 3rd point, which is considering stereotypes. So how the customer views us in different ways. And then that last point that we would want to get information from our customers is what are those emotions that they're experiencing throughout their contact with us. So are they worried or frustrated, or are they excited or relieved when they interact with us? So really just taking the time to get these answers and then look at all the answers together.
Yeah. I think to follow up on that, to hit the next key point, it's to talk about the power of common purpose. And there's the book indicates that there's 3 critical needs to creating a common purpose. One being clearly define the organization's mission. And like our company's already done that. And we talked about as a group last week, that's creating a place where people can thrive. And by adding even a little bit more onto that, that could even be by also unlocking their full potential. And then secondly, the communicates a message internally. What that means for us, that's our core values. That's our onboarding process for new hires. That's different forms of training, whether that's trailheads or cross training, or we have tons of different management training courses that we go through. And also our mentorship program, helping in addition to the onboarding. And the third one in the power of common purpose would be create an image of the organization. And what that looks like for us is our project life cycle. So from start to finish, what does that look like in detail?
And so with that, we also kind of discussed ArcFab's kind of our common purpose of a company. So like establish our quality services and our service values. So when we got together and discussed this, number 1 was safety, which we put up that on top for to make John happy, of course. So our next one we put is dependability, trustworthiness, respect, pricing, that's for pre-con and sales, timeliness, communication, value, and quality. And then the last one is a relationship. I mean, our Aide De Camp this year is about building relationships with our customers. So we feel that's absolutely necessary to have as one of our quality standards. And with that, we deliver on our promise. So after we deliver on our promise, I mean, we're establishing everything.
Yeah, and I think it's really, it's interesting to see kind of how the book lays out or how the Disney Institute lays out some of these tools in comparison to the work that we've been doing, like in implementing EOS as a business. Like we've established a lot of these things, and we talk about like having tools to understand our customers better. The go-to-market strategy on our on the vision part of our VTO, our Vision Traction Organizer. We're really laying out. We've already really well defined what the demographics and psychographics are for our customers, and what Disney calls a common purpose, we refer to as our purpose, cause, and passion, which Kent mentioned is we want to create a place where people can thrive. So the interesting take on this and why we had it, like why we chose to add, just in relationship to this presentation, add some more words to that was like Disney defines the purpose as three parts. It's first you declare the goal, you state how the goal is going to be accomplished, and then you define who the customer base is. And so, well, we know we want to create a place where people can thrive. So we've checked off two parts of that formula there, and then like how we're going to do that, how we're going to accomplish that mission is by unlocking their full potential. And so, yeah, just to double down on what Kent was saying, like what this common purpose like represents to our business internally, or how it's manifested internally, is through our core values, all the resources that we provide, and the efforts that we go to bring our employees into our culture. So great, it's reaffirming that we've got a lot of this stuff kind of set up as a business. I'd imagine there's businesses showing up to the Disney Institute that haven't thought through these things, that are going to be defining and developing these things on site, on premise, and we're going to be ahead of the curve from that perspective. So really excited about that. The next slide kind of lays out the magic of CAST, and cast members are typically Disney says cast members are the first critical delivery system of the common purpose and quality standards, which Kent and Shelby laid out in the last slide. So, Ryan, what do you got to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, the idea here is just it's kind of the old average. Like, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And again, just in the context of Disney, like people walking, and I've never been. Like, I'm excited to see some of this, but you hear about people walking into different areas or different parks, and just the interactions, the setting that they see, the characters they interact with, some of the experiences. The first impression is critical, and but in addition to that, the book makes the case that it's not just for our customers, but for our employees as well. So, kind of piggybacking off of the last section, and how these values of the common purpose like permeate the organization and tell that story, making an impression to our own employees, in addition to our customers, needs to be a big part of the design. And so, for that's like recruitment, brand, culture, there's a lot of things that can be deployed for making a good first impression, and making that be something that's part of the company's DNA. And so we were talking about how we're doing with that right now as a company, and like opportunities for improvement, what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong. But maybe the best way to like put it simply is the phrase in the book that I think Walt said, which is we don't put people in Disney. We put Disney in people. So like there's a spirit to Disney. There's a spirit to the culture, to the place. And like, how do we capture some of that and further bring that into an ArcFab organization, to where when our customers interact with it, like, man, there's just something different about interacting with ArcFab. There's just something different about working for ArcFab. So those are some of the goals that we discussed, how we're doing, room for improvement, and we're going to keep looking at that as we move into the training.
Yeah, Walt's quote there really resonates with me, because I've always said you can take the boy out of the ghetto, but you can't take the ghetto out of the boy, So
exactly.
What side?
I can't follow that up, but I'll try. Yeah, like we don't put Yeah, come on, man. We don't put people in Disney. We put Disney and people. Like that kind of ties into. I can't think now, but
Only one recording, Kent.
Jenny from the block.
yeah. Anyway, what I want to talk about is the behaviors of quality service. So kind of tied to that last point that Ryan so eloquently spoke on and Cash really ruined. The book talks about putting on like a good show and a bad show. And I think when you look at that on a behavior standpoint, like we need to be on our best behavior. And a lot of the books that we've already read speak on that every time, is like being on your best behavior, having good manners. Like you want to present yourself well to your customer. Another point is the autonomy for employees to adapt their own guidelines to their roles. So by doing that, you can kind of help hold your own self accountable by completing your own task at a higher standard, you know. And then there's shared knowledge of best practices and tools. So helping others out, just being on your best behavior. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I think the shared knowledge of best practices and tools is something that is easy to overlook. Like in our business, it's like there's never a shortage of problems, right? And I think most of us would you know, in private or maybe in public, admit to the fact that most of the work that we do is trying to put out fires and solve problems for people, which is in and of itself is like a great thing. But when we're hyper focused on problems, we're not talking about the successes and helping people learn from those. So when I think about shared knowledge of best practices and tools, there's an interesting Instagram reel that I saw recently, and it was talking about how a best leadership practice would be to ask somebody like how are the blueberries? And so the analogy there is like when we were hunter gatherers, right? We didn't like the way that we were able to succeed and evolve as a species was not because we were hyper focused on the mistakes that people made when they missed the buffalo, but it's like, how did you get the buffalo? How did you how were you successful in finding the berries? What were the things that led to your success? And so it's just the spirit of the reel was really encouraging leaders to focus on like the success and start with the sharing successes and helping people learn from that versus, you know, the hyper focus on the bad. So Disney puts forward both, right? They want to talk about the good show and the bad show, but that's something that I connected with on the shared knowledge of best practices and tools. So I think we can all do a better job of that. But Nick, you've got a point here about thinking globally, right?
Yeah, that fourth bullet point, think globally, perform locally. Really how I kind of took that was big city feel, big city, small town feel, or like we have the resources of a large company, a global company, but we still have, you know, the welcoming atmosphere of a small company, the compassion, the things like that. I think it's important to remember, especially like when we just had a company meeting and we see our 10-year goal and we want to have 600 employees, like we want to maintain like our current culture. So the larger and more diverse like a company gets, the more difficult it is to like maintain that coherent like culture, that purpose-driven culture. So I think Disney laid out some good examples of how they were able to do that. One of those was their Polynesian resort, which is in Orlando. It's like the Polynesian themed resort.
As you would guess.
For lack of better words, palm trees, all that good stuff. So when it first opened, it was one of their poor performing resorts. But through like the culture set by a specific group of cast members, it really turned around, is now like their most popular resort. and they're most sought after. And it was really like that small group of people that decided they have a really like strong desire and strong passion for like creating unforgettable memories for their customers. And it wasn't really about making money, or it was about bringing that magic to the customer. So
Yeah, and so I'll hit on that last bullet point, building your performance culture. So building our performance culture essentially is just creating new visions and missions for our company, aligning our company for those new visions, right? So it's kind of like our EOS system. It's the right person in the right seat. So kind of breaking it down to make sure that who we have in leadership is that right person, right? So also it is values connected to the missions being identified. Consider what our values are and in our organization, and like what do we thinking about it is what do we think working in ArcFab is like? What do we think some of our values are, right? And so it's our core values, and that's how that originally got broken down. So we also discussed additional values to support our culture. So like the wow factor, putting in extra efforts. We do like personalized gifts for our new hires. That could be like something fun that we could add to our culture. And then another one is how do we update these values and meet the service needs for our customers? Employees will be able to, whenever we do that, employees will be able to stick around and improve our quality service.
Yeah. So, Jeff, can you take us to the next slide?
Yeah, the next slide coming up for you. Ryan's gonna frame this video up.
Yeah. So just along the inspiration of analyzing cast and thinking through casting, we have the casting audition for Will Ferrell on Saturday Night Live.
This is Duckweiler. Please hold all my calls. I'll be busy for the next half hour or so. I've got a lot of paperwork I need to do. Thank you. Tell Don Jacobs to hold. Yes. No, I'm busy. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so what's interesting about this is like this video actually brought a lot of things into context for me, because I'd never seen this until Ryan shared this with us in his presentation, but he did this exact sketch in his interview, and I had no idea what the heck was going on. But now it makes a lot more sense. So
yeah, it's good.
The magic of Ryan.
Magic.
Right. You're welcome. Which leads me to the magic of setting. The big idea with setting is, it's intuitive for a lot of organizations to like understand the importance of people, healthy culture, of processes, efficiencies, and interdependencies between those two things. But the book argues that the bulk of the service experience is delivered by what they call the setting. And as we mentioned early on, like framing this stuff up, the setting is anywhere that the customer interacts with you. And there's been across industries, like this has transformed like what that looks like in recent years and recent decades, just with like the rise of technology and how a lot of things are deployed. So it's like, it's not just for us, a superintendent of a general contractor interacting with one of our foremen or our superintendent, it's a lot bigger than that. It's like any ways that they're interacting, any platform, any conversation, any setting where those interactions are taking place. And so the book just points out that every single detail speaks to the customer, and everything, they're getting that first impression in sort of like how all that stuff is coming together, how well it's thought out. They affect the perceptions the customers have over the company. And so the way the book defines setting is it's the environment in which service is delivered to customers, all of the objects within that environment, and the procedures used to enhance and maintain the service environment and objects. And so the book, like to tie it into the Disney context, they use this example of something that's called what's inside the berm. And so the idea is when you enter into the Disney park, a lot of people comment about how it's like you're stepping into another world, and that's all intentional. They literally will raise the contours and the boundaries of the park so that like there is complete delineation and separation between, you know, backstage stuff, which we'll get into later, and like what you're seeing. So it really feels like another world. And so for us, led to some good conversations of us like thinking through like what we consider the stages that we're conducting business with our customers. Some of it's obvious, like some of the sales interactions and lunch and learn type things. But then like how are the customers interacting with our phone system? How are they interacting with our website? Like what are the things that we don't know about that is affecting the perception and impression of our customers, and how do we improve upon those things? And so the last thing is, or maybe one of the other key items that they get into with this is that this particular part of the process of the experience is a lot of work, and it's because creating practical magic is a lot of work. If you want someone to actually like feel the magic of interacting with your organization, like it takes a lot of effort. And so that's kind of what we're dialed up for.
So I'm going to touch a little bit on the guiding the guest experience part of this slide. So every organization tells its own unique story to its customers, and those stories should be supported by the setting. We don't realize, until I read this book, I didn't realize how important the setting was. They broke it down to be like each part of the park, which I haven't been there either, but each part of the park, like the trash cans will fit in with whatever theme it is. Even goes to like if it's brick versus like stone or what you're walking on, just the colors. And so it's really it was really eye-opening to understand how important it was. So with that, we thought about one of the examples in the book was thinking about your favorite store. So like, what impression do they convey? How easy is it to navigate in the store? Sometimes, you know, when you have a product, you don't know, do I check out here? Do I check out there? So how easy is it? Is the store clean and orderly? Or is it totally chaos, like a Goodwill or something, right? What does the store itself tell you about the company as like a corporate company? That's something that's really important. So a goal for us was to think about what impression our setting tells our customers. And that's something that we kind of discussed and we want to continue thinking on. We need to make sure our setting reinforces the story we're telling, and we need to help guide our clients to have that experience. So some of the questions we asked ourselves was, kind of like what Ryan was jumping on earlier, how well does our phone system work? And just so many other questions. And all of those factors are so important in making our clients have a positive experience.
Yeah. And kind of touching on what Ryan had already said, similar to the setting, a part of that is on stage and backstage. And he had mentioned going into Disney and you're in your own little world there. So the on stage is areas in view of the customer, and then the backstage is behind the scenes, obviously. There's there's 3 values that this touches on, and that's key to separation is that anything that does not support or enhance the quality service experience. So think along the lines of like hotel guests seeing laundry, so just out in the open. Another one is unnecessary expenses and inefficient to the design and maintenance of the backstage areas. So just making sure everything's it's all in the details. And then customers would be a distraction to employees at work behind the scenes. So just get in the way of getting your tasks done.
Yeah, just real quickly on that, like I think they just like Walt Disney would be horrified and like flying off the handle if he saw like something as simple as, you know, somebody wheeling a laundry cart at the edge of the this, you know, where no one's paying attention, but just having something that's like foreign to that world, like he was hyper vigilant about, because it's, you know, it all adds to the stuff that Ken's talking about. So a lot of that's really interesting to think about, like in our context.
Something I started asking myself after finding out how important setting is and how detailed it can be. I started asking myself, how can we use the magic of setting to create details that would help us accomplish our purpose, but without creating distractions? So I'm really excited to see Disney for the first time and all of those details that they keep mentioning. And then hopefully we'll come back and consider how we can add details like that to our customer interactions in the same way. I'm especially interested in adding those subtle details that contribute to our purpose, things that customers might not notice right away. And so also in this chapter, we talk about how it can be important, appealing to all of the 5 senses. So paying attention to sight, sound, smell, touch, and even taste in all of our customer interactions. So if we intentionally plan how our customers will experience all these 5 senses, we'll have more control over how they feel when we interact with them. And again, some of those things might not be things they notice. So if the building doesn't smell bad, they might not think of it, but of course, if it has a bad smell, that's something they will notice, and that will take away from their overall experience.
Yeah, and I mean this is pretty straightforward. I mean, I think it makes sense to people that like, especially the front stage and backstage aspects of this, like, and like we know that the like the way that our guys show up on a job site, the types of tools, the quality of tools, the quality of gear and stuff that they're using, the quality of the truck that they pull up on the job site, all creates an impression on the customer. And so the interesting thing here is just like thinking through how there's like some tie into this with the when we were going through Uncommon Service, it was talking about looking at the attributes that are like most important to your customers and really focusing on those and building your customer experience around those. It's kind of interesting to think about the backstage, onstage aspects through that lens, and like really like focusing on, you know, on your backstage elements. You can obviously design those for functionality, efficiency, reduced cost, that kind of stuff. But everything that's important to your customer, that your customer's going to see, is like where you make your investments and you pay attention to all the details. You know, so it's really kind of 2 different mindsets when you're thinking about front stage and backstage. So
Yeah, I was going to mention. I think it's important to note the people who kind of make the setting, or like, so in Disney, like the people that bring the setting, that bring it to life, would be the Imagineers. So that's imagination plus engineering, and they kind of, what guides them in like thinking of a potential new setting or trying to build that world for their customers is are there 10 commandments. And I don't want to go through like every single commandment unless you guys like really want me to, but the major thing is about knowing your audience, like having them at the forefront of your mind when you're like building something out, and having a cohesive flow, having visual cues, which is what the hot dog is for on the slide. Walt Disney called it creating a weenie. We're not sure on the spelling, but basically what it means is Walt Disney, when he was a kid, when he went to the circus, he would always look for the wiener cart, the hot dog cart, and so like that sprung up in his adulthood. He always wanted something that was like the center of the guest's attention. So that could be Sleeping Beauty's castle in the Magic Kingdom Resort or Magic Kingdom Park. So yeah, that's just I think it's important to bring up who's building that setting. Like, so for us, it would be like the cast for Disney. It would be our employees here at ArcFab, and just the guiding principles and like the culture that guides them while they're building that, because it's everyone's responsibility. Even the guy picking up trash, even the people picking up after the horses during Disney World parades, like they're all part of the cast as well, and they're all a part of the setting, and they're building the setting. So
Yeah, it's good. And just last piece on that, it's kind of along those lines of, and ties into the onstage backstage thing. But one of the things that they talked about that Walt and the team learned through the setting creation was like, they kind of kept those things completely separate, right? It was like, we only want the customers to experience the onstage, the different worlds, some of those elements. But they found out that like there was a strong desire to understand what goes on. Like, how is this magic? How is it possible that you could create something like this? And the customers being enrolled and brought into like the backstage. And so it's kind of interesting to think about in terms of like, we're all about what we're like our customer facing modes of operation and the products that we make, and like getting those things installed. But is there an opportunity to build more of a bridge to where they see into our processes more regularly, more transparently, that it has like a, those things feed each other, and how we can look at that. So it's interesting for sure. So next we've got Woody and Buzz introducing us to the magic of process. And as we get into that, the magic of process, there's a lot of elements here. And I think Adela spoke on it early on, but there's process flow, and then the idea of combustion. And so this kind of gets more into, okay, we've kind of analyzed who our customers are, what they want, what they need, like how we interface with that, our processes, and creating the setting and stuff. But then this kind of hones in on essentially, what do our customers complain about? So you've got these processes, and this very much applies to a place like ArtFab, where we, I think Jeff's called us like the most complex, simple business there is. You got all these processes, there's a series of actions, changes, functions, and they're all strung together to produce this result. And so you've got what the book calls like the human, the cast, and the setting, producing all these different outcomes. And so obviously with that, there's a good recipe for there to be these combustion points. Like when things are going great, the combustion points are controlled, but sometimes they're not. And so it's how you deal with that. And the book advocates the best way to identify those combustion points isn't just to look internally, but it's to study your customers and see what they're struggling with. Kent, you want to get into some of that?
Yeah, I was just thinking, we talked on this in other books also. It's listening to your customers and how they talk. But what are some of these the keys to listening to like the combustion points? There's questions like, what's the customer complaining about? Is it not receiving phone calls or emails, or our lead times are crazy long, or we're always late. These are some examples of potential complaints from the customer. Another thing that they would be asking is, or where do they get stuck during our customer experience? Could that be contract execution? Maybe it's submittal lead times. And then another question is, what are the common problems they face when interacting with us? I was thinking about this, and maybe some of the time it's vocabulary. Like I go through architecturals all day long, and the architecturals will call out awning, but to us it's a canopy. There's a difference in vocabulary there that could cause some problems, especially when having phone conferences. So it's bridging that gap. So the answers to all those questions are combustion statements.
And the notion there is to address these combustion points before they become explosion points, right?
Yeah, sorry.
We also looked at the 4 universal service process issues. The first one being guest flow, and there's a few solutions to that. The first one being optimizing the operation of product and service processes. So for example, minimizing waits by giving early access to certain customers. Another solution is optimizing the guest flow itself. So possibly allowing the customer to self-manage their experience. And another option or solution to the guest flow issue is optimizing the queue experience. Disney's example here is they try to minimize the discomfort during wait times in their lines. So they do a good job at entertaining guests while they have to wait. The second universal service process issue is cast to guest communications. So they really focus here on how it's important all employees are good at answering questions well and efficiently. You can use job shadowing techniques. You can make sure that you have only a few processes that are complex. And then Disney also points out that sometimes the high-tech solution can be the most simple one in solving this employee-to-guest communication issue. The third universal service process issue is service attention. So customers have different wants and needs, desires, and we do have to pay attention to those and try and incorporate them into how we deliver our service. Disney says that the 2 ingredients to service attention is using the appropriate resources, and they say resources must be available and communicated. And then the last universal service process issue would be debugging service processes. They point out that most things aren't perfect the first time you do them. We're dealing with living systems that are never completely predictable, but also they say perfection can only be achieved for a short time anyway. So you may make a system or process that's perfect at first, but someday it's going to have bugs, and we'll have to figure out how to fix those. They also say that sometimes debugging process can be inconvenient to the customer, but in the long term, it's going to enhance customer loyalty and profitability. So it's worth it to go through that debugging process. Debugging guest-owned processes. They also say that guests sometimes make mistakes if they're left alone. Sorry, what was that one?
Yeah, I think one of the points earlier was like in order to like optimize guest flow, you can like help allow the customers to self-manage their experience. So it's just debugging the guest owned processes, I think is the point there. Yeah, in general, all this stuff should be pretty straightforward and make sense. It's just making sure that you're in it like in the same manner that they are focused on every detail, every minute detail of their setting. They're on the back end of that, outside of the customer's eye. There's processes there to like to deliver results. Like processes are when their cast and setting come together and produce results. That's the processes is like the underlying aspect of that. So I think the point here is you're never done improving that. Like you can always be better. That's the spirit behind like service process debugging. So, and then
Yeah.
and then as a wrap up to this whole thing, right? All of these pieces have to come together in order for Disney to deliver their quality service, right? So the last piece of that is integration.
Yeah, the magic of integration is, like we said, you arrive at bringing it all together. So when all of the elements, the people, the processes, the setting are brought together under the common purpose, then you begin to be in that integration stage. And so this is when like the book highlights, like the value of the entire organization becomes greater than the sum of its parts. So it's not just about the people, it's not just about efficient processes. It's kind of like how all those things interact with that purpose, and it's integrated in a very systematic way, like comprehensive way to bring all of this together. And so through that, they actually use a tool called the integration matrix, and that tool is something that can be used as a diagnostic on like how we're doing as a company. It can be used as something like to build and formulate strategy, and it can be something as like a measurement for like what kind of trajectory you're on, in pursuit of these goals. And so they have something called the Star Guest Program and all kinds of fancy stuff that I'm sure we'll get into at the Institute. But this is kind of the comprehensive stage of everything that we've talked about so far.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, there's 3 elements to magical service moments. And Ryan spoke about the integration matrix. Well, that's part of one of the elements is the integration matrix leaves room for more than one right answer when creating a great service moment. So you can always build off of it. There's not too little of ideas, I guess. There can be, that was my next point. As many ideas can be implemented as desired. So you don't have to settle. And then the last part is a 3-part feature. So there's 3 features on great service moments. There's high touch, which is guest interaction. And then there's high show, which is vivid presentation. And then high tech, which is speed, accuracy, and experience for service solution.
And one final tool that Theodore refers to is the storyboard, and it's basically how it sounds. It's a great way to map out service solutions and build up plans for implementing them. So like 2 of the guidelines that the book mentions was to not be intimidated by the use of drawings, and don't restrict storyboard to drawings. And another thing is with the storyboard, it's kind of the thought of go ahead and put your ideas and your thoughts out there and create that storyboard, and then just continue to grow it and make it better and fit more with your team and your company and your values.
Yeah.
Yep. I really like the integration matrix. I think it's a great visual for like looking at how your quality standards intersect with your delivery system. So, like looking at Disney laid out their quality standards. Their number one being safety. Like looking at that through the lens of cast setting and process. Like what are they achieving, or how do those intersect with each other? And so, I thought it was a really useful tool. Something I think that we'll be able to get some value out of. Anybody got any final words on the book? I think we're all really excited about the fact that we've kind of gotten familiar with this content headed into Disney. I think that worked out well from a timing standpoint. And yeah, I think that pretty much wraps us up then. So this will be our last book review study for Aide De Camp. Again, we've shared shared our takeaways from the 5 books that we've studied related to customer experience, customer service, and I think the general feel is that these books really kind of gave us a great foundation to head into our training with. Ultimately, we're going to be leaving training with, hopefully something equivalent to like a design development set around a customer experience plan, and we'll be finalizing that, within the next 45 days, and then really start working. Spending the majority of our time through the rest of Aide De Camp this year is like implementing those changes, those improvements to our customer experience. So we don't know what that'll look like in terms of modules, but anytime we change process, update systems, we're going to be communicating that through some sort of training content. I think it'll land in Trailhead. So stay tuned for that. Otherwise, we really appreciate y'all tuning in, and look forward to working with most of our organization through the customer experience improvements. So that wraps us up. Might be the last time you see Mickey. All right. Thank you.